"Ma'am, you've been asked to move along." The voice, crisp and devoid of warmth, sliced through the quiet hum of the old bookstore. Eleanor Vance, known to the regulars as Ellie, didn't flinch. Her gaze remained fixed on the faded photograph she was examining, a sepia-toned image of Willow Creek's original general store, circa 1890. A thin, uniformed arm, belonging to Officer Miller, blocked her view, a stark blue sleeve against the warm, dusty light filtering through the stained glass window. "This isn't a public lounge. You've been here for hours, and you haven't purchased anything beyond that single cup of chamomile." Ellie slowly lowered the photo, her movements deliberate, almost painfully so. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, met Miller's. He was young, fresh-faced, with the kind of rigid posture that came from too much training and too little life experience. Beside him, Officer Davies, older, heavier, shifted his weight, a clipboard clutched to his chest like a shield. The air in the dusty tome and brew thickened, charged with the unspoken tension that had been building for weeks. Ellie's gaze drifted past Miller, sweeping across the familiar shelves, the worn armchairs, the scent of old paper and brewing coffee that was her morning ritual. This wasn't just a bookstore. It was a sanctuary, a quiet harbor in a world that had grown too loud, too fast. For years, every Tuesday, like clockwork, she occupied the same worn leather armchair by the window, a tattered journal resting on her lap, a single cup of Earl Grey cooling beside her. Today, however, was different. Today, two officers stood over her, their uniforms a jarring blue against the cozy, muted tones of the shop. "I purchased my tea," Ellie said, her voice a low murmur, raspy with age but steady. She gestured to the half-empty mug on the small side table. "One tea, 5 hours ago," Miller retorted, his tone edged with impatience. "And we've received a complaint. You're loitering, ma'am, interfering with business." A soft gasp rippled from behind the counter where Leo, the owner, stood frozen, his usually jovial face pale. Leo, a man whose beard seemed to hold more stories than his books, had built this place from nothing, a beacon of quiet resilience in a town increasingly squeezed by chain stores and online giants. He knew Ellie's routine. Everyone here did. She was a fixture, as much a part of the shop's soul as the smell of aged parchment. "Interfering," Ellie repeated, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her voice. "I am reading. I am quiet. I am present." Her gaze flicked to Davies, whose eyes darted away, fixed on a display of new releases. He looked uncomfortable, a man caught between orders and his own sense of decency. "We have a new town ordinance," Miller pressed on, oblivious to the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. "No prolonged stays without active patronage. It's about maintaining decorum. And frankly, ma'am, your presence has been noted. Some find it unsettling." Ellie's lips thinned. Unsettling. That was the word they used for anything that didn't fit neatly into their sanitized vision of Willow Creek. She knew what this was about. The new town council, spearheaded by Miller's uncle, Councilman Thorne, was on a mission to revitalize Willow Creek, which often meant pushing out the quiet, the old, the less overtly productive elements. Leo's bookstore, with its creaky floors and mismatched furniture, was an eyesore to them, a holdout against the shiny new developments planned for the town square. "Unsettling, officer?" Ellie's voice was still quiet, but it now carried an unexpected edge, like silk wrapping around steel. "Is my presence a threat? Am I disturbing the peace?" "You're taking up valuable space," Miller said, his voice rising slightly, betraying a hint of frustration. "This is private property. The owner has the right to refuse service, and we have the right to enforce the town's wishes." Leo finally found his voice. "Officer, she's a regular. She's welcome here. There's no complaint from me." Davies, looking relieved to have an out, started, "Well, then, if the owner says—" "The complaint came from an anonymous source, Mr. Petres." Miller cut in, his eyes blazing. "And it's about the appearance of loitering. It reflects poorly on the town. Now, ma'am, are you going to leave peacefully, or do we need to escalate this?" He gestured towards the door, his hand hovering near his belt. Ellie slowly reached into her worn denim jacket. The jacket, patched in a dozen places, was her constant companion, a soft armor against the chill of Vermont mornings and the colder indifference of the world. She pulled out a small, old flip phone, its plastic casing scratched and faded. It looked like a relic from another century. "What's that, ma'am?" Miller asked, his brow furrowing, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "You calling someone?" Ellie didn't answer. With a practiced thumb, she flipped open the phone, the satisfying click echoing in the sudden silence of the bookstore. She pressed a single speed dial button. The small, grainy screen glowed. She waited, the rhythmic pulse of the dial tone a steady counterpoint to the rising tension in the room. Leo watched, bewildered. Carla, the young barista with bright pink streaks in her hair, had her phone discreetly pointed at the scene, her thumb hovering over the record button. The line clicked. Ellie brought the phone to her ear. Her eyes, still fixed on Miller, held an ancient, unreadable depth. "It's happening again," she said, her voice calm, clear, and utterly without emotion. And just like that, the air in the room didn't just thicken. It solidified. Every customer, every browser, every soul in the dusty tome and brew felt it. The quiet hum of the coffee machine, the rustle of turning pages, all faded into a profound silence, the kind that vibrates in your chest. Miller's face, previously set in an expression of self-righteous authority, now held a flicker of uncertainty. Davies looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. "Who the hell did you just call?" Miller demanded, his voice sharper now, a desperate attempt to reassert control. Ellie simply lowered the phone, snapped it shut with the same deliberate motion, and placed it on the small table beside her half-finished tea. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She just looked at them, a silent challenge in her gaze. A few minutes later, the bell above the door chimed, a gentle sound that usually heralded a new customer. This time, it announced the arrival of a figure who seemed entirely out of place in Willow Creek. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, his silver hair slicked back, his face etched with the kind of weary intelligence that only comes from navigating labyrinthine corridors of power. He moved with a quiet, efficient purpose, his eyes sweeping the room, taking in the scene with a single comprehensive glance. He carried no briefcase, no visible identification, yet the authority he exuded was palpable, radiating from him like heat. He stopped a few feet from Ellie's table, his gaze settling on Miller and Davies. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, resonant rumble that commanded immediate attention. "Officers, I'm Special Agent Maxwell Thorne, Department of Homeland Security, Counterintelligence Division. I believe you were just speaking with my associate." Miller visibly swallowed. His rigid posture seemed to deflate. "Sir, we were just responding to a complaint. Loitering." Thorne's eyes, as sharp and cold as cut glass, narrowed slightly. "A complaint, you say? And what exactly was the nature of this loitering? Was she brandishing a weapon, threatening patrons? Or perhaps, was she simply sitting quietly, enjoying a cup of tea in a local establishment?" His gaze flicked to the flip phone on the table. "That phone, officer, is encrypted. The number she called is not in any public directory. And the associate she just spoke with is currently briefing the president on a matter of national security." Davies paled, his clipboard slipping a fraction in his grasp. Miller's face flushed a deep crimson, then drained to an ashen gray. "Sir, we had no idea. We were just following procedure." Councilman Thorne, Maxwell Thorne interrupted, his voice cutting like a scalpel, "has no jurisdiction over federal assets. And officer, let me be very clear. My division monitors certain individuals for their safety and for the security of the nation. Any interaction, especially one involving harassment or baseless accusations, is immediately flagged. Every word you've spoken, every action you've taken, has been recorded. Not just by the body cameras you wear, but by a network far more sophisticated than anything you're aware of." He paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Now, I suggest you both provide your badge numbers. And then you will leave. Immediately, Miller stammered. But sir, your careers, Thorne stated, his voice dangerously low, are currently balancing on a very thin thread. I suggest you don't snap it. The humiliation was complete. Miller and Davies, their faces masks of stunned disbelief and dawning fear, mumbled their badge numbers, turned, and practically stumbled out of the bookstore, the bell above the door chiming their ignominious retreat. The silence they left behind was not peaceful. It was a stunned, watchful quiet. Ellie picked up her flip phone, turning it over in her hands, her expression unreadable. You didn't have to come, Max. Thorne finally allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. You know I always do, Ellie. Your family. He sat down opposite her, his tailored suit looking incongruous in the worn armchair. Are you all right? Ellie nodded slowly. Just tired. Tired of explaining myself. Tired of being invisible until someone decides I'm a problem. Leo, still wide-eyed, approached the table. Ellie? Mr. Thorne? What in the world? Thorne looked at Leo, his expression softening slightly. My apologies for the disruption, Mr. Petres. But rest assured, these officers will not be bothering Ms. Vance, or your establishment, again. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, audible only to Leo and Ellie. Ellie Vance, here, she didn't just serve. She saved lives. More lives than most people can count. She broke codes that changed the course of operations. She found agents in impossible situations. She was the ghost in the machine, the quiet force that kept people alive. She's earned the right to sit anywhere she damn well pleases. Leo stared, then his gaze returned to Ellie, seeing her not as the quiet, elderly regular, but as a woman forged in fire, carrying secrets and triumphs beyond his comprehension. Carla, who had been recording, slowly lowered her phone, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. You want me to push this further, Ellie? Thorne asked, his voice returning to its official, unyielding tone. A full investigation into the Willow Creek Town Council's ordinances? I've heard whispers about some land deals, some pressure on small businesses. Ellie looked out the window, at the quiet, tree-lined street of Willow Creek, a town she had chosen for its peace, its unassuming nature. No, she said, her voice firm. Not for me, but for Leo, for this place, for every quiet corner they try to erase. She turned back to Thorne. And for those officers, they need to learn, not just about me, but about what service truly means, and what respect costs. Thorne nodded, a grim understanding passing between them. Consider it done. He rose, pulled a discreet, unmarked business card from his pocket, and placed it face down on the table. You call that number if anything else happens. Anything at all. Understood. Ellie nodded. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Ellie, Thorne replied, a depth of gratitude in his voice that transcended the official. He left as quietly as he arrived, leaving behind a ripple of awe and speculation. The news, as it always does, found its way out. Carla, the barista, uploaded her footage to a discreet, encrypted server, knowing the right people would find it. Within hours, the body cam footage from Officer Davies's camera, likely flagged by Thorne's team, was leaked. The internet, a swirling vortex of outrage and instant justice, latched onto the story. Willow Creek's quiet hero, read one headline. Veteran harassed in bookstore, screamed another. The video of Ellie's calm defiance, her quiet phone call, and Thorne's chilling arrival went viral. The small, independent bookstore in Willow Creek became a focal point. People from all over the state, then the country, began showing up. Not just to buy books, but to sit in Ellie's chair. To leave small notes of thanks, to simply exist in the space she had quietly defended. Local news crews descended, then national reporters. They dug into Ellie's past, unearthing snippets of her classified service, redacted commendations, whispers of missions so sensitive they barely existed in official records. She wasn't just a veteran with a bronze star. She was a legend whispered among a select few in the intelligence community. A woman who had operated in the shadows, her victories measured in lives saved and disasters averted, never in medals or parades. Ellie, oblivious to the digital storm, continued her routine. She didn't own a smartphone, didn't follow social media. She still arrived at the Dusty Tome and Brew every Tuesday morning, the faded denim jacket her only uniform. Leo and Carla, however, were overwhelmed. Harold, the diner owner from the original story, was not present in this transformed narrative. "Ms. Vance," Carla said one morning, her voice a mix of excitement and disbelief, "there's a foundation that wants to buy you a house. A real house. Not a voucher, a house." Ellie looked up from her journal, a faint frown on her face. "A house? Why?" "Because," Leo interjected, wiping down the counter, "you reminded people what dignity looks like. You reminded them that some heroes don't wear capes. They just quietly hold the line." Ellie sighed, a weary sound. "I just wanted to read my book." But the world, once blind, was now watching. Officer Miller and Officer Davies were placed on administrative leave, pending a full internal investigation. The town council's revitalization ordinances were put under intense scrutiny. The corporate developer, whose quiet influence had been behind the scenes, found their plans for Willow Creek suddenly facing unprecedented public and federal resistance. The story of Ellie Vance, the quiet veteran in the old bookstore, had become a rallying cry for preserving community, for respecting the overlooked, for recognizing that true strength often lay in quiet resilience. Ellie did eventually accept the house, a small, unassuming cottage on the outskirts of Willow Creek, with a garden that reminded her of her grandmother's. She still came to the Dusty Tome and Brew every Tuesday, though now she sometimes found herself quietly sharing a cup of tea with visiting veterans, or answering questions from young people who saw her not as a problem, but as a living piece of history. One blustery autumn morning, a reporter, persistent and earnest, finally cornered her. "Ms. Vance," he asked, his voice hushed with reverence, "what does it feel like to be a hero?" Ellie looked at him, her winter sky eyes holding a lifetime of stories. "Hero?" she repeated softly, a faint, sad smile playing on her lips. "I was just trying to have my tea. A hero, young man, is someone who makes sure the next person can, too, without having to fight for it." She looked around the bustling bookstore, at the faces of the regulars, at Leo behind the counter, at Carla, now a confident manager. "That," she said, "is the real victory." And for the first time in a very long time, Eleanor Vance felt a profound sense of peace. Not the quiet peace of invisibility, but the resonant peace of being seen, truly seen, and understood. The dust had settled, but the impact of her quiet stand had just begun. The story of Willow Creek wasn't just about a veteran. It was about a community finding its voice, a town remembering its soul, and a nation learning that sometimes the most powerful acts of defiance are spoken in a whisper, and the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with quiet dignity.